At 5:47 a.m., on a rain-soaked Tuesday morning, 7 black Mercedes sedans formed a perfect line outside St. Mary's Hospital in Valley Forge. This bewildered hospital staff, as executives in tailored suits rushed through the doors. Inside, mechanic Jack Hudson sat alone in the waiting room, still wearing oil-stained coveralls, unaware that the woman whose life he'd saved by fixing a stranded ambulance was Elellanena Thompson, CEO of Meridian Motors. Jack didn't know that while saving her life, he'd lost his job of 15 years, or that his split-second decision to abandon a luxury car repair would shatter his world before rebuilding it in ways he never imagined. As executives rushed past without a glance, Jack stared at his calloused hands, wondering how he'd tell his son there wouldn't be enough for next semester's college tuition, completely unaware that Elellanena was already making calls from her hospital bed that would change both their lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rain pounded relentlessly against the windows of Donovan's auto repair, creating a steady drumbeat that matched Jack Hudson's precise movements as he worked under the hood of a Mercedes S-Class. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision, feeling components rather than just seeing them. Thin streams of water had begun to seep through the aging roof, forming small puddles on the concrete floor. "Jack, how much longer on the Henderson job?" Frank Donovan's voice boomed across the garage, cutting through the classic rock playing from an old radio. Jack didn't look up from the engine. "About an hour, Frank. Fuel injection systems are more corroded than we thought." "An hour? Henderson's picking it up at noon. That's cutting it close." Frank checked his watch with exaggerated irritation. "I'll get it done." Frank hovered nearby, arms crossed. "You better. That's Paul Henderson. He serves on the city council. We need his business." Jack nodded, already refocused on the engine. At 47, he'd spent more time under car hoods than most people spent at family dinners. After 15 years at Donovan's, he knew Frank's patterns: the constant hovering, the reminders about important customers, the subtle pressure to rush. Tal Watson, the shop's youngest mechanic, cursed as a bolt refused to loosen on an old Chevy. "Need a hand?" Jack called. "Over." "Nah, I got it," Kyle answered, though frustration edged his voice. Jack smiled slightly. "Pride of youth. I'd been the same way once." The phone at the front desk rang, and Diane Peterson, Frank's assistant manager, answered. Within seconds, her hurried footsteps approached. "Frank," she called, urgency in her voice. "There's an ambulance broken down on Highway 23 about 2 miles east. The driver says the engine just died. They've got a critical patient on board." Frank waved dismissively. "Not our problem. Tell them to call county services." Jack straightened from the Mercedes, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "What kind of ambulance?" "Type 3. Ford, I think," Diane replied. "The paramedic mentioned something about a fuel line." Jack glanced at the Mercedes he'd been working on, then at Frank, whose expression had already hardened into a familiar, stubborn frown. "Don't even think about it, Jack," Frank warned. "Henderson's car needs to be done by noon. That's our priority." Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the metal roof. Jack looked at his watch. 9:17 a.m. "That ambulance has someone's life on board," Jack said quietly. Frank stepped closer. "And that Mercedes pays our bills. You leave that car now?" Don't bother coming back." The garage fell silent. Even Kyle stopped working, watching the confrontation unfold. Jack held Frank's gaze for a long moment before reaching for his toolbox. "Someone's dying, Frank." "I mean it, Hudson. Walk out that door. You're fired." Jack grabbed his raincoat from a hook on the wall. "I'll finish Henderson's car when I get back." "There won't be a when you get back," Frank shouted as Jack headed for his battered pickup truck. The rain hit Jack like a cold shower as he dashed across the parking lot. His pickup sputtered to life on the second try, and he pulled onto the main road, windshield wipers working overtime against the downpour. Highway 23 curved through the eastern edge of Valley Forge, a stretch of road Jack knew well. He'd changed countless tires along this route over the years. Within minutes, he spotted the ambulance, hazard lights flashing weakly in the gray curtain of rain. Jack pulled alongside and jumped out, toolkit in hand. Miguel Rodriguez, a paramedic Jack recognized from town functions hours, stood anxiously by the driver's door. "Jack Hudson, man, am I glad to see you." Miguel's relief was palpable, even through the rain. "What's happening?" Jack asked, already moving toward the hood. "Engine just died. We've got a 58-year-old female. Possible heart attack. Condition deteriorating." Miguel glanced back at the ambulance. "We radioed for another unit, but it's at least 20 minutes out." Jack popped the hood. "She might not have 20 minutes. Let me take a look." Dr. Rachel Miller emerged from the back of the ambulance, raindrops instantly dotting her glasses. "How's it coming? Her BP's dropping." "Working on it," Jack responded, already deep in diagnostic mode. His hands moved systematically, checking connections, following the fuel line. Years in the Army keeping vehicles running in worse conditions than this had trained him well. Within minutes, he located the problem: a cracked fuel line and a loose connection in the electronic fuel pump. "I need duct tape and something to splice this line," Jack muttered. Miguel ran to the ambulance's supply compartment and returned with an emergency kit. Jack's fingers worked quickly, fashioning a temporary repair. "This will get you to St. Mary's, but it needs proper fixing after." "You're a lifesaver," Miguel said, already heading back to the driver's seat. Jack wiped rain from his eyes. "Start it up." The engine coughed, sputtered, then roared to life. Jack slammed the hood shut and gave Miguel a thumbs up. "We owe you one," Dr. Miller called as she climbed back into the ambulance. "Just get your patient to the hospital," Jack responded, watching as they pulled away, siren wailing to life again. Standing in the rain, he felt a momentary satisfaction. Then reality set in. Frank's ultimatum. 15 years of employment gone. He checked his watch. 10:02 a.m. Henderson's Mercedes was supposed to be done by noon. Jack climbed back into his pickup, water dripping from his clothes onto the worn seats. When Jack returned to Donovan's, Frank was waiting in the bay door, arms crossed. "I told you not to go," Frank said flatly. Jack walked past him toward the Mercedes. "I'll still get Henderson's car done." Frank stepped into his path. "No, you won't. I meant what I said. You're fired." The garage went silent. Kyle and Carl, the veteran mechanic, both stopped working. "Frank, come on," Carl intervened. "Jack's been here 15 years." "And he knew the rules," Frank replied coldly. "Customer vehicles come first. Always." Jack stood still, water pooling at his feet. "Someone could have died." "Not our problem. There are procedures for breakdowns, county services, tow trucks. They wouldn't have made it in time." Frank's jaw tightened. "That's not your call to make. Not on my time. Not with my customers waiting." Jack glanced at the Mercedes. "Give me an hour. I'll finish Henderson's car." "No, you're done here. Get your things and go." Frank pointed to the door. Diane appeared from the office, concern etched on her face. "Frank, reconsider. Jack's our best mechanic." "He disobeyed a direct order," Frank snapped. "If I let this slide, what's next? Everyone deciding which jobs matter and which don't." Jack took a deep breath, then walked slowly to his locker. 15 years of employment dismantled in less than 15 minutes. He gathered his personal tools, the ones he'd collected over decades, each with its own story, and placed them carefully in his toolbox. Kyle approached awkwardly. "This isn't right, Jack." "It's okay, kid." Jack managed a small smile. "You take care of that Chevy. The owner's brakes were squealing, too." Carl waited until Frank returned to the office before approaching. "This town's got other garages, Jack. I'll put in a word with Steve over at Cooper's." "Thanks, Carl." Jack closed his toolbox with a definitive click. As Jack carried his belongings to his truck, the rain finally began to ease. He placed the toolbox in the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel, staring at the garage that had been his second home for 15 years. His cell phone rang. It was Thomas, his son. "Hey, Dad," Thomas sounded upbeat. "Just got my schedule for next semester. Full course load, but I think I can handle it." Jack gripped the steering wheel, unsure what to say. College tuition was already stretching his budget to the breaking point without his job. "That's great, son," he managed. "We'll talk about it tonight." "Okay. Everything all right, Dad? You sound off." "Just a rough morning. Nothing to worry about." After hanging up, Jack sat in silence, reality sinking in. At 47, starting over wouldn't be easy. Valley Forge was a small town with limited opportunities. Most garages already had their trusted mechanics, and Frank had influence. His word could make finding another position difficult. Jack started his truck and pulled away from Donovan's, perhaps for the last time. Out of habit, he drove toward the Crossroads Diner, where Helen Martinez had been serving the best coffee in Valley Forge for over a decade. The diner was quiet for a late Tuesday morning. Jack slid into his usual booth by the window, watching as the clouds began to break apart, allowing thin rays of sunlight to pierce through. Helen approached with a coffee pot. "You're not usually here this time of day." "Things change," Jack replied, accepting the steaming mug gratefully. Helen studied his expression. "What happened?" "Got fired. Helped an ambulance that broke down on Highway 23. "And Frank fired you for that?" Helen's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "That's insane." Jack shrugged, warming his hands around the mug. "Frank has his rules. Rules that put money before people's lives." Helen shook her head disapprovingly. "That ambulance? Was it the one that just took Elellanena Thompson to St. Mary's?" Jack looked up, surprised. "Don't know who was in it, why?" "Word travels fast around here. Elellanena Thompson, the CEO of Meridian Motors, collapsed during a meeting at their satellite office. Heart attack, they're saying." Helen lowered her voice. "Ambulance broke down on the way to the hospital. If they'd been delayed any longer..." Jack absorbed this information slowly. Elellanena Thompson wasn't just any CEO. Meridian Motors employed half the county. Their main production facility in neighboring Westbrook City was the economic engine for the entire region. "I should get over there," Jack said, standing suddenly. "Make sure the ambulance is properly fixed." Helen nodded approvingly. "That's you all over, Jack. Always finishing the job." Jack left a few dollars on the table for the coffee and headed towards St. Mary's Hospital. The rain had stopped completely now, and weak sunshine glinted off the puddles in the parking lot as he pulled in. Be inside the hospital's main entrance. Jack approached the reception desk. The ambulance that brought in Mrs. Thompson. Where would I find it? The receptionist pointed toward the emergency bay. Maintenance is looking at it now, but they're having trouble. Jack nodded his thanks and headed in that direction. Outside, he found Miguel standing beside the ambulance, looking frustrated as a hospital maintenance worker scratched his head under the hood. "Jack!" Miguel called, relief evident in his voice. Was hoping you'd show up." "Thought I'd check that my temporary fix held up," Jack replied, moving toward the vehicle. "It got us here," Miguel confirmed, "but it's still not right. Hospital maintenance isn't specialized in ambulances." Jack examined his earlier repair. The duct tape had held, but the engine needed proper work. "I can fix it properly if you want." Miguel stepped aside gratefully. "Be my guest." As Jack worked, Miguel leaned against the ambulance. "That woman you helped save, Elellanena Thompson?" Her heart stopped right as we pulled into the bay. If we'd been even 5 minutes later. Jack focused on the fuel line, not wanting to think about what might have happened. "She going to be okay?" "Critical, but stable. They've got her in ICU." Miguel watched Jack work. "What about you? Shouldn't you be back at Donovan's?" "Not anymore," Jack replied simply, tightening a connection. Miguel's expression fell. "Frank fired you for helping us." Jack just nodded, continuing his work. "That's messed up, man. I'll talk to the hospital administrator. Maybe there's a position in vehicle maintenance here." "I appreciate that." Jack finished the repair and closed the hood. "Try it now." Miguel started the engine, which purred smoothly. "Perfect. I owe you, Jack. We all do." Jack wiped his hands on a rag. "Just doing what needed doing." As Miguel was called away for another emergency, Jack found himself alone in the ambulance bay. The reality of his situation began to settle in again. No job, bills piling up, Thomas's tuition due in a month. He decided to wait in the lobby for a while, hoping to catch Dr. Miller before she finished her shift. Maybe she could also put in a good word with hospital administration. The hospital waiting room was nearly empty when Jack sat down, still in his oil-stained coveralls. He rubbed his hands together, noticing the ingrained grease in the creases of his skin, badges of his life's work. Outside the window, the first of 7 black Mercedes sedans pulled up to the hospital entrance, followed quickly by 6 more, forming a perfect line. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Jack watched silently as men and women in tailored suits streamed through the hospital doors, their purposeful movements and hushed conversations creating an atmosphere of controlled urgency. None spared him a glance. To them, he was invisible, just another blue-collar worker on a vinyl chair. A security team followed closely behind the executives, speaking into earpieces and scanning the waiting area with practiced efficiency. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly aware of his oil-stained coveralls and work boots. "They're from Meridian Motors," a soft voice said. Jack turned to find an elderly woman seated nearby, her hands folded neatly over her purse. "Board members, executives, lawyers," she continued. "My son works in their accounting department. When the CEO sneezes, they all catch cold." Jack nodded politely, but said nothing. His mind was on more immediate concerns, like how to pay his mortgage next month. The hospital's automatic doors slid open again as a distinguished older man rushed in, silver hair damp from lingering raindrops. Robert Thompson, Elellanina's husband. Jack recognized him from newspaper photos, though they'd never met. The hospital staff immediately directed him toward the ICU, several executives falling in step behind him. Jack's phone buzzed. A text from Lewis Parker, his former Army commanding officer who now ran the Veteran Support Center in Valley Forge. Heard what happened at Donovan's. Stop by the center when you can. News traveled fast in small towns. Jack pocketed his phone without replying. He wasn't ready to discuss his unemployment with anyone yet, especially someone he respected as much as Lewis. Dr. Miller emerged from the emergency ward looking exhausted. When she spotted Jack, surprise registered on her face. "You're still here," she said, approaching him. "Miguel mentioned you lost your job because of us." Jack shrugged. "It wasn't because of you." "Still," she insisted, "what you did was extraordinary. Mrs. Thompson is stable now. But if that ambulance had stayed stranded..." She left the thought unfinished. "I just did what needed doing," Jack said simply. Dr. Miller studied him thoughtfully. "The hospital's always looking for skilled maintenance personnel. I could put in a word." "I'd appreciate that." She nodded and turned to leave, then hesitated. "For what it's worth, Mrs. Thompson was conscious when we arrived. She asked about the man who fixed the ambulance. I think she'd like to thank you personally." "That's not necessary," Jack replied. "Maybe not, but gratitude from Elellanena Thompson isn't something to dismiss lightly," Dr. Miller said with a meaningful look before continuing on her way. Jack remained seated, uncertain what to do next. The practical part of his mind urged him to start looking for work immediately. Valley Forge had limited opportunities for mechanics outside the few auto shops in town. A commotion near the reception desk caught his attention. A woman was raising her voice at the receptionist, demanding to see Elellanena Thompson. "I'm Grace Wilson from the Valley Tribune," she insisted, press credentials dangling from her neck. "I just need 5 minutes." Security personnel moved swiftly to intercept her. Jack watched as they firmly but politely escorted the journalist toward the exit. Elellanena Thompson was clearly being protected from more than just medical complications. Jack decided it was time to leave. Whatever happened next with his career, it wouldn't be solved sitting in a hospital waiting room. He stood, stretching stiff muscles, and headed for the exit. Outside, the afternoon sun had broken fully through the clouds, steam rising from the wet pavement. Jack walked to his truck, each step heavy with the weight of uncertainty. He started the engine and sat for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. The Veteran Support Center occupied a small building on Elm Street, its modest facade belying the crucial services it provided. Lewis had converted a former hardware store into a gathering place for local veterans, offering everything from job placement to counseling. Jack hadn't planned to go there, but his truck seemed to make the decision for him, turning onto Elm Street almost automatically. Inside, several veterans sat in mismatched chairs, some playing chess, others reading newspapers. Lewis was helping an older man with paperwork at a desk in the corner. When he spotted Jack, he immediately wrapped up his conversation and approached. "Heard Frank finally went off the deep end," Lewis said, by way of greeting, his weathered face creasing with concern. "News travels fast," Jack replied. "Helen called me." Lewis gestured toward a coffee pot in the corner. Want some? Jack nodded, following Lewis to a small kitchenette. So, you saved Elellanena Thompson's life and got fired for it, Lewis summarized, pouring 2 mugs of coffee. Only you, Jack. I didn't know it was her in the ambulance. Would it have made a difference if you did? Jack considered the question. No, not really. Lewis handed him a steaming mug. That's why you were the best damn vehicle maintenance specialist in our unit. You fixed what needed fixing no matter what. They sat at a small table near the window. Outside, Valley Forge continued its daily rhythms, oblivious to Jack's personal crisis. What now? Lewis asked. Jack stared into his coffee. Not sure. Thomas's tuition is due next month. How much? 4,000. Lewis whistled low. State college isn't cheap these days. He's worth it, Jack said firmly. Kid's brilliant, gets that from his mother. A moment of silence followed. The mention of Emma, even after 5 years. Her absence left a tangible void. You know, Lewis began carefully, I've been thinking about expanding our services here. The Veterans Center could use a small garage, teach some of these guys basic automotive skills. Marketable trade. Jack looked up, suddenly attentive. You offering me a job, Lewis? More like a partnership. I've got some grant money coming in. Not much, but enough to convert that storage space out back. Buy some basic equipment. Hope flickered briefly in Jack's chest, then faded. Wouldn't be enough to cover Thomas's tuition, not right away. But it's something to build on. Jack nodded gratefully. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. The offer's on the table whenever you're ready. As Jack finished his coffee, the center's television caught his attention. A news report showed footage of the Meridian Motors headquarters in Westbrook City with a caption reading, CEO hospitalized, company stock fluctuates. That's quite a butterfly effect you caused, Lewis remarked, following Jack's gaze. Fix an ambulance, affect the stock market. Not funny, Jack muttered. So, wasn't the joke sabukineng. Small actions, big consequences. That's life. Jack's phone rang. An unknown number. He almost let it go to voicemail, then thought better of it. Hello, is this Jack Hudson? A formal female voice asked. Yes. Who's this? Rebecca Winters, Human Resources Director at Meridian Motors. I'm calling on behalf of Mrs. Thompson. Jack straightened in his chair, catching Lewis's questioning look. Mrs. Thompson would like to speak with you, Rebecca continued. Would you be available to come to St. Mary's Hospital tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.? Jack hesitated, unsure how to respond. Yes, I can do that. Excellent. Please ask for me at the reception desk. I'll escort you personally. The call ended before Jack could ask any questions. He stared at his phone in bewilderment. What was that about? Lewis asked. Elellanena Thompson wants to meet me tomorrow. Lewis grinned. Told you, big consequences. Jack pocketed his phone, uncertain how to feel about this development. Probably just wants to say thanks, Lewis suggested, or offer you a job. What would a car manufacturing CEO want with a mechanic like me? Lewis shrugged. Maybe she needs someone who doesn't follow the rules when lives are at stake. Jack rose from the table, grateful for Lewis's friendship, but needing time to process everything. I should get home. Think about what I'm going to tell Thomas. The truth, Jack. Always the truth. He's not a kid anymore. The drive home was short, but felt endless. Jack's apartment was in a modest complex on the east side of Valley Forge, close enough to walk to his former workplace in good weather. Now that proximity seemed like a cruel reminder of what he'd lost. The apartment was empty when he arrived. Thomas had a late lab session on Tuesdays, which gave Jack a few hours to collect himself before having to explain their new financial reality. Jack showered, finally washing away the grease and rain from the morning. As the hot water ran over him, he tried to make sense of the day's events. In less than 12 hours, he'd lost his job of 15 years and received a personal summons from the CEO of the region's largest employer. After changing into clean clothes, Jack sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, calculating their financial situation. Without his income, they had perhaps 2 months before serious trouble began. Thomas's tuition would accelerate that timeline dramatically. Jack was still working on the numbers when Thomas arrived home, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hey, Dad," he greeted, dropping his keys on the counter. Thomas resembled his mother around the eyes, with Jack's build and practical nature. At 19, he already carried himself with quiet confidence. "How was class?" Jack asked, trying to sound normal. "Professor Williams thinks my design project could qualify for the state engineering competition." Thomas opened the refrigerator, then paused, noticing the papers spread across the table. "What's all this? You're never home this early." Jack took a deep breath. "Sit down, son. We need to talk." Thomas's expression grew serious as he sat across from his father. "What's wrong?" "I lost my job today," Jack said simply. Thomas's brow furrowed. "What? Why? You're the best mechanic they have." "Ambulance broke down on Highway 23 with a critical patient. I left to help fix it. Frank didn't approve." Understanding dawned on Thomas's face. "He fired you for that? For helping someone?" Jack nodded. "That's about the size of it." Thomas absorbed this information, then asked the practical question Jack had been dreading. "What about tuition?" "I'm working on it," Jack assured him, though the notepad in front of him offered few solutions. "There's some options. Lewis Parker suggested a partnership at the Veterans Center, starting a small garage there." "That sounds good," Thomas said, though uncertainty tinged his voice. "It's a start, but it won't cover everything right away." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their new reality settling between them. "I could take a semester off," Thomas finally suggested. "Work full-time. Save up." "No," Jack interrupted firmly. "You're not interrupting your education. We'll figure this out." "Dad, be practical. 1 semester won't—" "Thomas." Jack's tone left no room for argument. "Your mother and I always agreed your education comes first. That hasn't changed." Thomas knew better than to press the point when his father invoked Emma's memory. Instead, he asked, "So, what's the plan?" "I've got a meeting tomorrow at the hospital. Elellanena Thompson wants to see me." Thomas's eyes widened. "The Elellanena Thompson? Meridian Motors? She was the patient in the ambulance. Holy—" Thomas caught himself. "And she's asking to see you specifically?" Jack nodded. "Don't read too much into it. Probably just wants to say thanks. Or offer you a job," Thomas suggested, echoing Lewis's earlier comment. "That's what Lewis said. But it's not likely. What would someone like her want with someone like me?" Thomas looked at his father with surprising intensity. "You saved her life, Dad. That creates a connection." Jack brushed aside the comment. "We'll see. In the meantime, I'll start calling other garages tomorrow." Thomas nodded, but a thoughtful expression remained on his face. Who was it that said crisis and opportunity are the same thing in Chinese? No idea. But it sounds like something your philosophy professor would say, Jack replied with a small smile. Actually, it was my economics professor, Thomas grinned back. Point is, maybe this is both. Jack wished he shared his son's optimism. Maybe. For now, let's focus on dinner. I've been too busy getting fired and fixing ambulances to eat today. As they prepared a simple meal together, Jack was struck by Thomas's resilience. Despite the uncertainty hanging over them, Thomas maintained his positive outlook that Jack realized was Emma's influence, the ability to see opportunity in adversity. Later that evening, Jack sat alone on their small balcony, staring at the lights of Valley Forge. In the distance, he could make out the illuminated sign of Meridian Motors' satellite office near the town center. Tomorrow, he would meet the woman behind that corporate empire. A woman whose life he had saved without even knowing who she was. Jack wondered what Elellanena Thompson was like. The business pages portrayed her as a formidable executive who had transformed Meridian Motors from a struggling regional manufacturer into a national competitor. Some called her ruthless, others visionary. Tomorrow he would form his own impression. As Jack gazed at the night sky, he found himself hoping against all logic that Thomas and Lewis might be right. Perhaps this crisis could, indeed, become an opportunity, but experience had taught Jack to expect little and prepare for less. His world opportunities rarely came without hidden costs. With a sigh, he returned inside to prepare for bed. Whatever tomorrow brought, he would face it with the same determination that had guided him through 15 years at Donovan's. 5 years as a single father, and a lifetime of making broken things work again. Jack arrived at St. Mary's Hospital 15 minutes early, dressed in the only button-down shirt he owned. The pale blue fabric, slightly faded from years of washing, had been Emma's favorite. He'd ironed it carefully that morning, a skill he'd perfected after her passing. The hospital lobby was considerably calmer than the previous day. No parade of executives, no security personnel scanning the room, just the ordinary rhythm of a small-town medical facility, nurses changing shifts, visitors arriving with flowers and get-well cards. At the reception desk, Jack cleared his throat. "I'm here to see Rebecca Winters. I have an appointment regarding Elellanena Thompson." The receptionist's demeanor shifted immediately, back, straightening as she reached for the phone. "Your name, sir?" "Jack Hudson." She spoke quietly into the receiver, then nodded. "Please have a seat, Mr. Hudson. Ms. Winters will be down shortly." Jack sat in the same chair he'd occupied yesterday, though it felt different now, like he'd been invited into a world he didn't belong in. His calloused hands rested awkwardly on his knees, the blue-collar worker's equivalent of not knowing which fork to use at a fancy dinner. 5 minutes later, Rebecca Winters emerged from the elevator. In her early 40s, she carried herself with polished professionalism, tailored business attire, contrasting sharply with Jack's modest clothing. "Mr. Hudson, Rebecca Winters." She extended her hand with a warm smile that seemed genuine despite its practiced perfection. "Thank you for coming." Jack stood, suddenly conscious of his weathered appearance next to her corporate polish. Her handshake was firm, direct, a quality he appreciated. "Mrs. Thompson is eager to meet you," Rebecca continued, gesturing toward the elevator. "She's been moved from ICU to a private room on the 4th floor." As they rode upward, Rebecca maintained pleasant small talk. "I understand you're a mechanic at Donovan's Auto Repair." Was, Jack corrected. Got let go yesterday. Rebecca's expression remained neutral, though her eyes registered interest. I see. And that was related to yesterday's incident with the ambulance. Jack nodded but offered no further explanation. The elevator doors opened to reveal a floor that barely resembled the rest of St. Mary's. Soft lighting, original artwork on walls, plush carpeting in the hallway, clearly a wing reserved for those who could afford premium care. Two men in dark suits stood outside a door at the end of the corridor. They straightened as Rebecca approached, nodding respectfully. "Mrs. Thompson is expecting us," she informed them, and they stepped aside without comment. Rebecca knocked gently before entering. "Elellanena, Jack Hudson is here to see you." The room beyond was spacious, with large windows overlooking the town. Flowers filled every available surface, their collective fragrance giving the space the atmosphere of a garden rather than a hospital room. Elellanena Thompson sat propped against pillows in the adjustable bed, looking remarkably composed for someone who had suffered a heart attack the previous day. At 58, she carried an aura of authority that even a hospital gown couldn't diminish. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back neatly, and though her face was pale, her eyes were alert and penetrating. "Mr. Hudson," she greeted, her voice stronger than Jack had expected. "Please come in." Jack stepped forward immediately, feeling out of place amid the luxury. "Mrs. Thompson? Rebecca, would you give us some privacy?" Elellanena requested. "Of course," Rebecca withdrew, closing the door quietly behind her. Elellanena gestured to a chair beside her bed. "Please sit. I've been eager to meet the man who saved my life." Jack sat cautiously. "I just fixed an ambulance, ma'am. The paramedics and doctors saved your life." She studied him with interest. "Dr. Miller tells me the ambulance would have been stranded for at least 20 more minutes without your intervention. By their estimation, I wouldn't have survived those 20 minutes. She paused, letting the reality of that statement settle between them. "So, yes, Mr. Hudson, you did save my life." Jack shifted uncomfortably under her direct gaze. "Just did what needed doing." A hint of a smile touched Elellanena''s lips. "That phrase. Dr. Miller mentioned you said the same thing yesterday. It's refreshing in its simplicity." An awkward silence followed, which Jack was unsure how to fill. Elellanena seemed content to observe him, as though cataloging details for future reference. "I understand you lost your job because you left work to help the ambulance," she finally said. Jack tensed slightly. "News travels fast." "It does, when I ask questions," Elellanena replied matter-of-factly. 15 years at Donovan's Auto Repair, consistently praised by customers. Military background and vehicle maintenance. Frank Donovan doesn't seem like a man who appreciates the value of what he lost. "Frank has his principles," Jack said, feeling oddly compelled to defend his former employer. "Despite everything," Elellanena asked, "business comes first for him. And for you, what comes first?" The question caught Jack off guard with its directness. "People, I guess. Always has been." Elellanena nodded, as though he'd confirmed something important. "That's evident in your actions. Tell me about your military experience with vehicles." Jack wasn't sure where this conversation was heading, but answered honestly. 8 years. Army vehicle maintenance specialist, everything from Humvees to tanks. Deployed twice to Afghanistan. If it had an engine and broke down in a combat zone, I fixed it. Under pressure, with limited resources, Elellanena added. It wasn't a question. That's the job. Elellanena shifted slightly, wincing at some hidden discomfort. Do you know much about Meridian Motors, Mr. Hudson? Only what everyone in Valley Forge knows. Region's largest employer. You took over 7 years ago when the company was struggling, turned it around. The simplified version, but accurate, Elellanena acknowledged. What's less known is that we're at another crucial juncture. The automotive industry is changing rapidly. Adaptation is essential for survival. Jack nodded, still uncertain why she was sharing corporate strategy with him. I've built my career on recognizing talent in unexpected places, Elellanena continued. People who solve problems others can't or won't address. People who do what needs doing, regardless of conventional wisdom or corporate politics. She reached for a glass of water on her bedside table. Jack instinctively moved to help, but she waved him off with a determined look. I'm offering you a job, Mr. Hudson. The words hung in the air between them. Jack stared at her, sure he had misheard. A job? He repeated, and at Meridian Motors, Nazi? Our Special Projects Division could use someone with your particular skills and moral clarity. Jack's mind raced. This couldn't be real. Mrs. Thompson, I appreciate the offer, but I'm a mechanic. I fix cars in a garage. Not... You're far more than that, Elellanena interrupted. You're someone who makes the right decision under pressure. Someone who sees what needs to be done and does it regardless of personal cost. She paused. Those qualities are considerably rarer than technical skills, which you also possess in abundance. Jack struggled to form a response. I don't have a college degree, never even finished community college. Neither did I, Elellanena replied.